Okay, so it's Tuesday, 3:30. I'm back to my normal live sessions here. And I thought that maybe before I get to any of the questions that I have, I could give you a little bit of recap on trial last week since it was truly my first trial since the COVID situation started last week, or maybe before. Someone mentioned that my chair was too squeaky, so I put some WD on it and took the squeak out of the chair so it won't be distracting. Anyway, last week I was in trial in the 405th District Court here in Galveston, which is Judge Jared Robinson presiding. I had an aggravated assault causing serious bodily injury. And so, under the new protocols, we started trial. And everything about trying the case under the current protocols is extremely different and fairly difficult. To begin with, we started with voir dire, which is picking the jury. And if I remember correctly, we had 55 people in the jar, which is the jury assembly room. We call it the jar. And they have set up the jar here in Galveston County where all the prospective jurors are seated 6 feet apart. And everyone is required to wear masks in the proceeding as well. And one additional kind of difficulty was there are 2 large columns in the jar. And so there are people seated behind the columns that you can't see if you're standing at the podium with the microphone. And so that makes it a little difficult. There was at least one occasion where I was questioning the panel that someone out of my view had raised their hand. Obviously, I didn't see it, and the judge had to alert me to it. So I had to move away from the podium and the microphone and go over to a different area so that I could address that person's concern. The other strange thing is when someone has a mask on, you can't see their full facial reactions. So I can't see if someone's smiling, frowning, sticking their tongue out at me. I have no way to know. We have to rely on people, actually participating willingly or not, meaning they either raise their hand and volunteer, or we have to pick out certain prospective jurors and just ask them a question directly to try and elicit a response. The reason that's different is because sometimes in years past, when I'm picking a jury and I'm looking at facial expressions, for instance, when someone's interacting directly with, let's say, the state, I can sometimes tell from a person's facial expressions and mannerisms that that's not going to be a juror that I think is good for me anyway. And so I don't spend a lot of time questioning that witness. So for however long this goes forward, we have to adjust that for that. Also, because of all this, the process takes much longer than it did before. I mean, we pretty much ate the whole day picking that jury. We picked 12 jurors and 1 alternate. So that was all in the jar. And then the courtroom is on the 3rd floor. So the next day we resumed in the courtroom, which is also set up quite a bit different. In the 405th, the judge has, during our trial, there was a plexiglass partition for the witness stand, which also wrapped around by the court reporter, and then it was up where the judge was, and then also where the clerks are to the side of the judge, so that everyone was fairly well protected there. But again, everyone had to wear face masks during the entire proceeding. Also, in an attempt to keep the jurors socially distanced, we had, some in the jury box and then some seated out in the audience, so that half of the courtroom was closed off to the general public because we were housing jurors there too. Now, this was quite a bit different because, for over 20 years, I've been trying cases to the people sitting in the jury box. Now I got to remember to address the people out in the audience and the people in the jury box. So that was kind of a different thing. The only people that were allowed to remove their mask were the witnesses testifying on the stand, and that was because they were behind the plexiglass partition. And then, even then, the microphone for the witness had a cover on it, which every time a witness would be done, they would remove the cover, throw it away, put their mask back on, and then leave the witness stand. Then the court's bailiff would sanitize the area, put a new protective cover on the microphone, and we had to let that dry before the next witness could be called. So that kind of lengthened the process of calling witnesses. And, back to the thing about wearing the face masks the entire time, obviously it's uncomfortable. And when you're sitting and not talking, it's not as bad. But when you're talking, like when I was speaking with the jury, it's bad, right? Because it gets real hot. And it was funny watching some of the jurors. There were jurors that were struggling with wearing prospective jurors that were struggling with wearing the masks. There were some pulling it out, trying to get air. Some people had it down, and then a different deputy would go tell them to put their mask on. So that was obviously out of the norm, because while I'm watching this and I'm seeing this person struggling with their mask, I'm thinking in my head, is this person paying attention, or are they more worried about being irritated by the mask? So, it's quite a bit different. We had two odd things happen during jury selection, and one was a man just got up and started walking out. And then apparently he told the deputy he had to go to the restroom and couldn't wait. But it was sort of odd that he thought he could just get up and leave, because obviously everything has to stop until he comes back. So, and that was during the state's presentation, not mine. And I guess, maybe we should have admonished the jurors that if they needed a break to raise their hand, please don't just get up and leave. So that little snafu caused the judge to let anyone else to go to the restroom that needed to go. And so they did, which did lead to something else I forgot about. Anyway, there was another potential juror, who repeatedly stood up. And it was strange, we thought. I didn't know what to make of it. I just see this person standing up repeatedly and then standing up for a while. And so at a bench conference, the judge asked, should we call that woman up and see if there's something wrong that she can't sit for prolonged periods of time? Because, we need to know that. If she can't sit through the trial, we need to know. And so we did. We ended up calling her up, outside of the earshot of everyone else, and said, ma'am, we noticed that you stood up a lot. And so we wanted to make sure, do you have some type of medical condition that, you can't sit for a long time? Is something going on? And she says, no, I got up because my watch told me to stand up. So that was kind of funny. I mean, we're in the middle of jury selection, and her smartwatch is telling her, you need to move. And so she's just getting up. I thought that was funny. I've never heard that one before. And then another small little incident, which I pointed out, and we found out about by accident. A juror later raised his hand. At some point during the state's voir dire, they read out the names of the witnesses, which include police officers that may testify. And so that list is read, and then everyone is asked, do you know any of these people? And so this juror, we were asking generalized questions at the end, like, is there anything you think we need to know? And this gentleman raised his hand. I said, yes. And he said, well, I realize that I do know one of those officers. He was my neighbor. He said, I wasn't sure, so I had to ask. Who'd you ask? So I called my wife because I only knew his first name, and she confirmed that that was him. So then I had to take that opportunity to educate that juror that you can't do, as a juror, you cannot do outside research and get information. You have to rely on what's presented to you by the state from the witness stand. You can't call your wife and ask her to help you, fill in the puzzle. So that was kind of interesting. So what was the case? Overall, it was an assault, an aggravated assault. The reason it was aggravated was because of the serious bodily injury. The reason we went to trial is that the state would not offer anything except for time in the penitentiary. And the state asked the jury for time in the penitentiary, but we were able to get probation from the jury. So from the defense standpoint, that's a win because my client didn't go to the penitentiary. So unless y'all have any questions, more specific about the trial, I mean, that's kind of a rundown. This whole trying a case under COVID protocol is not ideal for anyone involved. But at the same time, I understand that, and like this client, he was in jail. And so I did not want to let him sit in jail any longer. So I did not want to try to move for a continuance based upon the pandemic and the situation. I had, a good hope that the jury would give him probation, and that way he could get out of jail, and he did. So the point is, the system is working. Now, that being said, this was a fairly simple case. The state called 3 witnesses, the complaining witness, another witness who was there, and then the officer who did the intake or the investigation. So I knew it wasn't going to be a prolonged trial. Would I want to try a very serious case that was going to last a week or more under these same conditions? I would not. I mean, it would be very difficult. So hopefully moving forward, things will start to loosen up a little more and we can get back to normal in that respect. Anyway, I did have some questions for this week, and so I'll go ahead and try to start answering them. And one is, what defines sexual assault? So the easiest way to say that is it's what you all think of as rape. It is having sexual activity with someone who does not consent. And obviously, the reason they don't consent could be for several reasons. One, if it's alleged forcibly. 2, if the person is passed out on drugs. Any way you can think of that a person did not consent and then sex is forced upon them, that is sexual assault in Texas. The next question is, are sexual assault cases public record? So the answer is yes. Every crime is public record. When you are charged with a crime, once your case is open, it will be viewable by anyone with access to a computer, basically. I mean, you can look it up on the clerk's site here in Galveston. Obviously, law enforcement will see it. Potential employers who do a background check on you will see any case, not just sexual assault. Any crime that you're charged with is a public record. The next question is sexual assault a felony? The answer is yes. It starts, the vanilla version starts at a second-degree felony and goes up from there with different enhancements at different levels. For instance, once you start talking about sexual assault of children, if the children are under a certain age, then the punishment range becomes not only a first degree, but can have a minimum of 25 years with a maximum of 99 years or life. But yes, sexual assault is a felony. Someone asked, Can sexual assault be verbal? The answer is no. You can't sexually assault someone verbally. Now, there are Class C, you can be written citations. You can be given a ticket for saying offensive things to someone, but that's not sexual assault. So no, sexual assault cannot be verbal. Can sexual assault charges be dropped? I'm not sure I understand the question. Any case can be dropped. The criminal case is always, well, in state court, is always styled the state of Texas versus, Joe Citizen. So the state of Texas brings charges against an individual, and the state of Texas can always decide to dismiss those charges for any reason that the state sees fit. So yes, sexual assault charges can be dropped just like anything else. Is it difficult to defend sexual assault charges? It is very difficult to defend a sexual assault charge because generally there are only two people. One is the person accused. The second is the alleged victim of the sexual assault. There are no witnesses. And unless there is some trauma involved, there's many times not any physical evidence. Now, obviously, sometimes there can be DNA evidence, but then still we have the issue of consent. I've had sexual assault cases of everything you can think of, and there have been cases where I believe that a person did consent. Maybe they were intoxicated, and then maybe they had a significant other, and then after having done the deed, they later regretted it and didn't want to face the possibility of their significant other finding out or someone else, and so they make up, sexual assault charges. That has happened. But generally speaking, yes, it's very difficult to defend a sexual assault charge. Are there different degrees of sexual assault? Yes, there are. As I said in a previous answer, they're felonies, and it starts at a second degree and just goes up from there, and it changes. There are different punishment ranges for different types of offenses, different punishment ranges for different types of relationships, meaning educator and student, if the person is disabled, there are so many ways to charge it that yes, there are different degrees, and the penal code is pretty complicated and long in the sexual assault area. This is a good one. What is the difference between sexually harassed and sexually assaulted? So sexually assaulted is a criminal offense and means that someone is alleged to have forced another to participate in sexual activity. Sexual harassment is not a criminal allegation. Sexual harassment is more of a civil litigation. And sexual harassment is usually verbal in nature, because if it became physical, then it would move into sexual assault. So sexually harassing someone is usually like in the workplace, saying inappropriate things, making inappropriate comments about the way a person looks, or ideas you may have about that person that are of a sexual nature. That's sexual harassment, and that's civil, rather than rising to the level of sexual assault, which is criminal. And that wraps it up for the questions I had for today. And we've been going for, I guess, about 20 minutes. I don't see, let me see. I got no questions in the comments, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up for today. If I should be back next Tuesday at 3:30. If y'all think of anything, email me or just wait and come on in the comments. Thanks, guys. Have a good week.